The day my grandmother's will was read, I walked into that lawyer's office expecting nothing. And I mean nothing. Not a penny. Not a painting. Not even a kind word from beyond the grave. But what I walked out with was something far more valuable than money. I walked out with the truth. And the truth, the kind that shakes you to your core, is what I'm about to share with you right now. So if you've ever been told you weren't good enough, if you've ever been erased by someone who is supposed to love you, you need to hear this story. Stick with me until the very end. And if it touches your heart the way I think it will, share it with someone who needs to be reminded that being written out of a will doesn't mean being written out of history. My name is Gina. And this is the story of how my grandmother tried to erase me, and how the United States Army made sure the whole world knew my name. I grew up in a beautiful old house in Alexandria, Virginia, just a stone's throw from the Potomac River. The house had been in my grandmother's family for 4 generations. It had tall white columns, a wraparound porch, and a magnolia tree in the front yard that bloomed like fireworks every spring. But inside those walls, it was cold. My parents died in a car accident on I-95 when I was 7 years old. I still remember the way the light looked that afternoon, gray and heavy, like the sky was carrying the weight I couldn't yet understand. I was too young to process the loss fully, but I understood one thing immediately: I was alone. My grandmother, Eleanor, took me in. She was a formidable woman, the kind who wore starched blouses and pearl necklaces even to breakfast. She had built the family fortune through smart real estate investments and an iron will. She was respected. She was feared. And she never, ever let me forget that I was a burden. From the very beginning, Eleanor made it clear that I was not the grandchild she wanted. She'd had a vision for our family: elegant dinners, prestigious connections, a lineage that would be spoken of in hushed, reverent tones. Instead, she got me. Quiet, bookish, more comfortable in the library than at a social gathering. I wasn't pretty enough. I wasn't charming enough. I wasn't worthy enough. Every day was a reminder. Gina, sit up straight. No one respects a sloucher. Gina, why can't you be more like Eleanor's friend's granddaughter? She's getting married to a senator's son. Gina, you're too plain. No one will ever look at you twice. And the one that cut deepest: you're not worthy of the family name. Those words followed me everywhere. To school, to dinner, to bed. They echoed in my head like a curse. And for years, I believed them. But there was one thing she couldn't control. One thing she couldn't take from me. My grades. My determination. My quiet, stubborn refusal to disappear. When I turned 18, I made a decision that shocked everyone, including myself. I enlisted in the United States Army. Eleanor was furious. The day I told her, she stood in the living room, clutching her pearls like I'd just announced I was moving to the moon. Women don't belong in combat roles, Gina. You'll embarrass this family. You'll disgrace your father's memory. I won't have it. I looked her in the eye for the first time in years. I said, "You don't have to have it, grandmother. Because I'm not asking for your permission." Her face went white. For a moment, she didn't speak. Then she said, "You'll be back within a year. You'll see. And when you come crawling home, don't expect me to welcome you." I didn't crawl home. I marched. Basic training was brutal. I won't pretend otherwise. The heat at Fort Jackson in South Carolina during the summer felt like standing inside a furnace. The instructors screamed in my face until my ears rang. My body ached in ways I didn't know a body could ache. But every time I wanted to quit, I heard her voice. "You're not worthy." And I kept going. I excelled. Not because I was the strongest or the fastest, I wasn't. But I was the most stubborn. I never gave up. I never complained. I simply refused to fail. Years passed. I rose through the ranks. I earned respect from soldiers who'd never expected to respect a quiet girl from Virginia. I deployed to Afghanistan, where I served as a logistics officer, ensuring that troops on the front lines had the supplies they needed to survive. It wasn't glamorous. But it mattered. And then, in 2012, everything changed. We were conducting a convoy operation through a particularly dangerous stretch of terrain near Kandahar. I was in the lead vehicle, navigating the route, when the unit ahead of us was ambushed. IEDs. Small arms fire. Chaos. Without thinking, I ordered my driver to push forward. We arrived just as the lead vehicle was being overrun. I grabbed a wounded soldier, dragged him to cover, administered first aid, and coordinated the evacuation while returning suppressive fire. I didn't think about my grandmother. I didn't think about being too plain or too quiet. I didn't think about anything except the soldiers who needed me. When the battle was over, 5 men were alive because of what I'd done. A few months later, I stood in a ceremony at the Pentagon, wearing my dress blues, watching a general pin the Bronze Star with Valor device on my chest. I didn't tell Eleanor. She'd find out anyway. She always did. But when she did, she didn't congratulate me. She didn't say she was proud. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I simply nodded and walked away. Because by then, I understood something she never would. The medal wasn't for her. It was for me. It was for the soldiers I'd saved. It was for the 5 families who got to see their sons come home. That was the last time I had a real conversation with my grandmother. Over the years, I continued serving. I eventually applied to the Judge Advocate General's Corps, the JAG Corps. I became a military lawyer, specializing in family law and estate disputes for active duty personnel. I helped soldiers protect their families. I helped widows secure their benefits. I helped children of fallen soldiers get the education their parents had wanted for them. But I never forgot the woman who tried to break me. And in the back of my mind, I always wondered, what would happen when Eleanor died? She was in her 80s now, her health declining. She'd always said I was in the will. She'd said it at family gatherings, almost as a threat, like I should be grateful she hadn't written me out entirely. But she also said a lot of things that weren't true. When the call came, I was stationed at Fort Bragg in North Carolina. It was a humid October morning, the kind where the air feels thick enough to drink. The phone rang at 6 a.m. It was my cousin, Harold. "Gina, grandmother passed away last night." I didn't cry. I didn't feel much of anything except a strange sense of finality. I said, "When's the funeral?" "There's not going to be a funeral." She wanted a small private service. "Just the family." "Harold, I am the family." There was a pause. Then, she made some changes to the will. "You might want to contact the lawyer." The knot in my stomach tightened. I knew, even then, that something was wrong. I flew back to Alexandria a week later. The lawyer's office was in a historic building near the courthouse. It smelled like old books and expensive wood polish. I sat in a leather chair, wearing my dress uniform, my bronze star shining on my chest. Harold was there too, looking smug. His wife, Brenda, sat beside him, her designer handbag on her lap like a shield. The lawyer, a man named Mr. Patterson, cleared his throat. "Gina, I'm afraid I have difficult news. Your grandmother left the majority of her estate to a charity focused on preserving historic properties, and a significant portion to Harold. She left you $1,000. Harold didn't even try to hide his smile. I didn't react. Not outwardly. But inside, something shifted. I'd expected disappointment. What I got was suspicion. "Mr. Patterson, may I see the will?" He hesitated. "Of course." I read it carefully. The date of execution was just 2 weeks before my grandmother's death. The signature looked off, too shaky, too uneven. And the language didn't sound like her. Eleanor was cold, but she was precise. This will was sloppy. It felt rushed. Forced. I looked at Harold. "When did you last visit grandmother?" He shrugged. "I stopped by a few times. To check on her." "Did you ever discuss the will with her?" "Of course not. That would be inappropriate." I didn't believe him. But I also didn't have proof. Not yet. Over the next several months, I began my own investigation. I used the resources I had access to as a JAG officer, not official resources, but contacts, connections. I spoke to my grandmother's doctor, a kind man named Dr. Chen. He confirmed that Eleanor's mental state had declined significantly in her final months. She'd been diagnosed with early-stage dementia. She'd had moments of clarity, but also moments of profound confusion. I asked, was she lucid enough to sign a legally binding document? Dr. Chen hesitated. I wouldn't have certified her as competent at that time. That was all I needed. I also tracked down my grandmother's former nurse, a woman named Linda who'd left the family's employ shortly before Eleanor died. Linda was reluctant to talk at first. But when I told her I was a military lawyer investigating elder abuse, she broke down. Harold was there all the time, she said. He'd whisper things to her. He'd show her papers and say, just sign here, Aunt Eleanor. It's for your own good. She didn't always understand. But he didn't care. He just wanted the money. I asked her if she'd be willing to give a sworn affidavit. She nodded. I also found something else. A video. It was from my grandmother's birthday party 2 years before she died, the last one she'd been healthy enough to enjoy. She had been laughing, telling stories. And at one point, someone had asked her about me. She'd smiled, a real smile, the kind I rarely saw. She said, Gina is the only one who ever made me proud. She joined the army, you know. She saved lives. She's a hero. Harold had been standing nearby, and his face had twisted in anger. I saw him storm out of the room. I kept that video. I didn't know why at the time. But I kept it. The will reading was held at the same lawyer's office. Harold and Brenda were there, sitting smugly on one side of the table. I was on the other. Mr. Patterson was at the head, shuffling papers nervously. Before we proceed with the distribution of the estate, I said, there are some matters I need to address. Harold rolled his eyes. Gina, it's over. She didn't want you to have the money. Get over it. Harold, I didn't come here for the money. Mr. Patterson looked confused. Then why are you here? I pulled out a folder. Inside were Dr. Chen's medical records, Linda's sworn affidavit, and a copy of the video. I said, because I'm contesting the will. Harold laughed. You can't contest it. It's legally binding. I opened the folder. It's legally binding only if my grandmother was of sound mind when she signed it. She wasn't. She had dementia. I have medical records from Dr. Chen that confirm she was not competent to sign any legal documents in her final weeks. Harold's face went pale. I continued, I also have a sworn statement from Linda, her nurse, who witnessed you pressuring my grandmother to sign a new will. She said you told her, just sign it, Aunt Eleanor. It's for your own good. That's a lie, Harold said, but his voice was shaking. I smiled, a cold, calm smile. Then you won't mind if I show you this. I plugged a small laptop into the room's television screen. The video began to play. Eleanor's voice, clear and strong, filled the room. Gina is the only one who ever made me proud. She joined the army, you know. She saved lives. She's a hero. Harold was frozen. Brenda looked like she was going to be sick. I turned to Mr. Patterson. Harold didn't just try to erase me from the will. He exploited a vulnerable, elderly woman for financial gain. That's elder abuse. And I have more than enough evidence to prove it. Mr. Patterson removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. Gina, this is very serious. I'll need to bring this to the court. Good, I said. Because I'm ready. The courtroom was packed. Not with spectators, no, this was a civil matter. But there were reporters. Word had gotten out that a decorated army officer was contesting her grandmother's will, and the press loves a good family drama. I walked in wearing my dress uniform, the bronze star gleaming on my chest. Harold looked like he'd aged 10 years since the will reading. He didn't meet my eyes. The judge, a stern woman named Justice Moreno, reviewed the evidence. Dr. Chen testified that my grandmother had been mentally incapacitated. Linda testified about Harold's constant pressure. The video was played for the entire room. When it was over, Justice Moreno looked at Harold. "Do you have anything to say?" Harold's voice was barely a whisper. I didn't think it was a crime. I just wanted what I deserved." The judge leaned. "This wasn't given to me by a lawyer or a judge. It was given to me by a grateful nation. It's not worth anything in dollars and cents. But it's worth everything in honor. And honor, real honor, can't be stolen or forged or erased by some cousin who couldn't be bothered to visit his own aunt." Then I did something that surprised everyone, including myself. I said, "I'm not going to take the money." Harold blinked. "What?" I looked at the judge. "Your Honor, I request that the estate be divided equally between two charities, the Wounded Warrior Project and a foundation I'm establishing to help military women transition to civilian life. I don't need my grandmother's money. I never did." Harold's face grumbled. He'd spent months scheming, lying, manipulating, and in the end, his cousin didn't even want the prize he'd fought so hard to steal. I looked back at him. "You tried to hurt me. But you only hurt yourself. Because now the world knows who you are. And the only thing you've earned is shame." I walked out of that courtroom a free woman. Not free from the law, free from the weight I'd been carrying for 30 years. The weight of my grandmother's cruelty. The weight of my cousin's greed. The weight of being told I wasn't worthy. I went back to my apartment at Fort Bragg that night. I sat on the floor, surrounded by boxes of medals, letters of commendation, and photographs of the soldiers I'd served alongside. I opened the box I'd kept sealed for years, the one containing my grandmother's old letters. The ones she'd written to me in basic training, telling me I'd never make it. I didn't burn them. I didn't tear them up. I just read them, one by one, and for the first time, I smiled. Because I realized something profound: they didn't hurt me anymore. The words that had once cut like knives were now just words. They had no power over me. Because I had something my grandmother never had. I had purpose. I built that foundation. I called it the Worthy Legacy Foundation. We provided counseling, job training, and financial support to women leaving the military. Women who'd been told they weren't good enough. Women who'd been erased by family, by society, by their own fears. The first year, we helped 30 women. The second year, 100. Today, we've helped over 2,000. And somewhere in that work, I found peace. Not because I got revenge, I didn't. Revenge isn't about making someone else feel small. It's about making yourself feel whole. It's about taking the hurt that someone gave you and turning it into something beautiful. I didn't destroy Harold. I didn't need to. He destroyed himself. His reputation was ruined. His marriage fell apart. Last I heard, he was living in a small apartment in Florida, working a dead-end job, still bitter, still angry. But me? I'm living in Northern Virginia, just a few miles from where I grew up. I have a beautiful home. I have a family of my own, a husband, 2 children, and a dog who greets me at the door every evening like I'm the most important person in the world. And sometimes, when I'm sitting on my porch watching the sunset, I think about my grandmother. I think about the woman who tried to erase me. And I feel not anger, not sadness, just a quiet, deep gratitude. Because if she hadn't been so cruel, I might never have found the strength to become who I am. You see, folks, the world is full of people who will try to write you out of their story. They'll tell you you're not good enough. They'll tell you you're too plain, too quiet, too ordinary. They'll try to erase you. But here's the truth: no one can erase you. Because your story isn't written by someone else. It's written by you. Every single day. Every single choice. Every single act of courage, kindness, or perseverance. My grandmother tried to erase me from her will. But she couldn't erase me from the pages of history. She couldn't erase the lives I saved. She couldn't erase the legacy I built. And she certainly couldn't erase the fact that I am, and always will be, worthy. So if you're watching this today, feeling like you've been written out of someone's story, I want you to remember this: you are not defined by what someone else takes from you. You are defined by what you give to the world. And the world needs you. It needs your courage, your kindness, your quiet, stubborn refusal to disappear. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that you're stronger than you think, I'd be honored if you shared it with someone who needs that reminder today. And if you'd like to hear more stories about courage, hope, and the incredible strength of the human spirit, consider subscribing to this channel. Thank you for spending this time with me. And remember, being written out of a will doesn't mean being written out of history. Your legacy is what you make of it. My name is Gina. And I am honored to have shared this story with you.